In 1775, Britain looked unbeatable. It had the world's strongest navy, a professional army, and an empire that just defeated France in a global war. Across the Atlantic, the 13 colonies were divided, underarmed, and not united around independence. 8 years later, Britain had lost America. That was not supposed to happen. Britain lost because a political crisis became a war. That war became a revolution, and the empire failed to crush it before the conflict widened beyond its control. This is the story of how Britain lost America. The American Revolution began with a British victory. The 7 Years' War ended with Britain stronger than ever. France had lost Canada, and British power in North America looked secure. Victory, however, had left Britain deep in debt. Ministers in London believed the colonies should help pay for the empire that defended them. From London, that seemed reasonable. In America, it felt like a change in the rules. The colonies had grown used to governing much of their own affairs through local assemblies. They taxed themselves locally, spent locally, and many colonists believed they possessed the rights of Englishmen across the Atlantic just as surely as in Britain itself. That was the breach. Britain thought it was restoring imperial authority after a costly war. Many colonists believed imperial authority was becoming more intrusive, more expensive, and less restrained by consent. The Proclamation of 1763 restricted settlements beyond the Appalachian Mountains. London wanted stability on the frontier. Colonists who hoped to move west saw interference. Then came new taxes, the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Townshend duties. Together they created a pattern. Parliament was calling the right to tax people who had no representatives in Parliament. That grievance became famous as no taxation without representation. However, this was not yet a movement for independence. Most colonists did not begin by wanting to leave the empire. At first, they wanted Britain to retreat, compromise, and recognize limits. Instead, each confrontation widened the breach. Even in 1775, many still hoped the crisis could be contained. However, governments often discover the true depth of resistance only when they try to reassert control. British authorities in Massachusetts knew colonial militias were storing powder and weapons. General Thomas Gage received orders to move. In April 1775, British troops marched out from Boston towards Concord to seize military supplies. At Lexington, they found armed militiamen waiting on the green. The colonial force was small and outmatched. No one knows with certainty who fired first. What mattered was simpler. After years of argument, blood had been spilled. The British pushed on to Concord. However, at the North Bridge, colonial militia resisted in force, and the expedition began to lose control of the day. What followed on the road back to Boston was something far more dangerous than a simple march home. Militia gathered from all across the countryside. They fired from behind trees, stone walls, and houses. The British column was harried mile after mile in a running fight that turned an imperial show of authority into a bruising retreat. The political crisis had now become a war. Soon after came Bunker Hill. Though much of the fighting was actually centred on Breed's Hill, the British could not allow rebel guns to dominate the approaches to Boston, so they launched frontal assaults against entrenched colonial positions. Again and again, the attackers climbed under fire. The British eventually took the ground, however only after the defenders began to run low on ammunition, and only at a heavy cost in officers and men. It was a British victory that felt like a warning. The colonialists had shown they could stand against regular troops and make the empire pay dearly for every advance. Still, independence was not inevitable. Many colonists remained loyal to the crown. Others simply wanted peace. Even as fighting began, the Continental Congress sent the Olive Branch Petition. One last attempt, one last appeal for reconciliation. George III rejected it. To the king, the colonies were in rebellion. To many colonists, the rejection confirmed their fear. Britain meant to subdue them, not negotiate with them. And once a government loses legitimacy, force becomes a blunt tool. It can win battles. It cannot easily restore consent. If you're interested in further historical context, take a moment and subscribe for more. The move from resistance to independence was not automatic. There were loyalists in every colony. There were moderates who feared disorder more than Parliament. There were men who wanted rights, not revolution. What changed the argument was the growing belief that the imperial relationship itself had broken. Thomas Paine's Common Sense, published in early 1776, gave that feeling political form. Paine attacked monarchy directly and argued that Americans should stop imagining reconciliation and start imagining separation. That mattered because revolutions need more than anger. They require a future. In July 1776, the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. It turned a colonial struggle into a universal claim: rights, equality, and government by consent. However, the revolution's promises were already limited. Enslaved people remained enslaved. Women were excluded from political equality. Native nations faced a republic that would often treat them as obstacles rather than partners. The American Revolution was powerful and flawed from the start. The United States had declared itself. Now it had to survive. If the revolution had collapsed in 1776, it might be remembered as a failed uprising. That it did not collapse owes much to George Washington's most important wartime talent: endurance. Britain moved against New York with overwhelming force. If it could destroy the Continental Army and seize the key urban centres, the rebellion might break before it fully matured. At first, it looked possible. On Long Island, British commanders outmaneuvered the American position, using superior discipline and a flanking move through the Jamaica Pass to turn Washington's line. The result was a major defeat. Only a desperate night evacuation across the East River saved the Continental Army from disaster. New York was lost. Retreat followed retreat across New Jersey. This is where many revolutions die: in retreat, desertion, and the growing sense that defeat is only a matter of time. Washington understood that one catastrophic defeat could end everything. So even while losing ground, he preserved the army. That was the key. He did not need to win every battle. He needed to keep the revolution alive long enough for British confidence to weaken and colonial resistance to harden. Then, in the winter of 1776, he struck. On Christmas night, Washington led his army across the Delaware in brutal weather, aiming for the Hessian garrison at Trenton. The crossing was slow, cold, and dangerous. However, the attack achieved surprise. The Hessians were overwhelmed, and the victory gave the revolution something it desperately needed: proof that the army could still hit back. Days later came Princeton. With Cornwallis trying to pin him down, Washington slipped away during the night, left campfires burning behind him, and struck British forces in the rear. It was a smaller battle than Long Island. However, psychologically it mattered enormously. The Americans had turned flight into resistance. These were not the largest battles of the war. They changed the mood of it though. The revolution was not dead, The army had not dissolved, and the rebellion could still strike back. A short war favoured Britain. A long war gave the Americans time. American firepower, aggressive field command, and Burgoyne's growing isolation combined to turn the campaign into a trap. By the time Burgoyne surrendered at Saratoga, the result was more than a battlefield defeat. It was proof. France had been watching closely. French leaders wanted revenge for earlier losses to Britain, but they had no reason to support a rebellion that looked likely to fail. Saratoga changed that calculation. The Americans had shown they could defeat a British field army. In 1778, France formally allied with the United States. This transformed the war. Britain was no longer dealing only with rebellious colonists. It now faced one of its greatest European rivals. The war stretched across the Atlantic world, from North America to the Caribbean and the sea lanes that connected them. Later, Spain and the Dutch Republic would also enter the wider conflict against Britain. This is one of the biggest reasons Britain lost America. It did not lose because the colonies became stronger than the empire in isolation. It lost because the war stopped being isolated. American persistence made survival possible. French intervention made final victory possible. Even after Saratoga, Britain did not give up. It changed strategy. British planners believed the South contained strong loyalist support. If royal authority could be restored there, perhaps the rebellion could be rolled back from the southern colonies upwards. In practice, the South became a nightmare. This was not just a conventional campaign, it was a civil war inside a war. Patriot against loyalist, militia against militia, raids, reprisals, and local vendettas. Britain captured Savannah, then Charleston. At moments, the American cause looked dangerously fragile. However, military success still did not produce durable control. That was Britain's recurring problem. It could capture cities and win battles, however it could not reliably turn victory into obedience. 2 battles showed how badly the Southern strategy could unravel. At King's Mountain, Loyalist forces under Patrick Ferguson took position on a ridge and expected to dominate the field. Instead, Patriot militia surrounded the hill and fought upward from cover, using the rough ground and tree line to neutralize much of the advantage of formal positioning. Ferguson was killed, and the defeat shattered hopes that Loyalist strength in the backcountry would restore royal authority on Britain's behalf. Then came Cowpens. There Daniel Morgan set a trap. He arranged his men in layered lines, expecting Tarleton's forces to attack aggressively. The first American lines fired and fell back in controlled fashion, drawing the British forward. When the moment came, the Americans turned, struck back, and trapped the attackers in a devastating reversal. It was one of the clearest tactical victories of the war, and a sharp blow to British confidence. Nathaniel Greene understood the war well enough to avoid the wrong type of heroism. He did not need one dramatic triumph. He needed to stretch the British, wear them down, and keep them moving through hostile country. The South did not restore royal authority. It drained British strength and pushed the war towards its final act. Cornwallis marched into Virginia and fortified Yorktown. He expected support. He expected the sea to save him. He was wrong. Yorktown was not an accident. It was the result of endurance, alliance, and timing. In 1781, a rare opportunity opened. French troops under Rochambeau linked up with Washington. More importantly, French naval power moved into position. Cornwallis could only hold Yorktown if Britain controlled the sea. That is exactly what failed. At the Battle of the Chesapeake, the French fleet blocked effective British relief. This was decisive. The British did not need a glorious naval victory. They required access. Instead, the French denied them control of the bay at the worst possible moment. Without rescue, Cornwallis was trapped. American and French forces closed in around Yorktown and began siege operations. This was not a dramatic single-day clash. It was a tightening siege, trenches advancing, artillery pounding the British position, pressure building day by day. The capture of the forward redoubts was crucial. American and French troops stormed them at night, bringing the Allied lines closer and making the British position even harder to sustain. The noose tightened. This is what the revolution had become. Britain did not lose America to one local colonial revolt alone. It lost in a war that had become international, maritime, and far larger than the original dispute over taxation and rights. In October 1781, Cornwallis surrendered. Yorktown did not instantly end the war everywhere, but politically it broke the British will to continue reconquering the colonies. The cost had been high, the prospects looked poor, and the wider war still demanded British attention elsewhere. In 1781, the Treaty of Paris recognized American independence. Britain had lost America. So why did Britain lose? Not because independence was inevitable, and not because the colonies were stronger in every conventional sense. Britain lost because it misread a political crisis as a problem of discipline. It believed force could restore obedience. However, every clash made obedience harder to recover. It also failed to end the war quickly. Washington kept the rebellion alive. Saratoga brought France in. The Southern War drained British strength, and once the conflict became global, Britain could no longer concentrate everything on crushing the colonies. That was the empire's problem in its simplest form. It was trying to defeat a rebellion, restore imperial rule, manage a transatlantic war, and fight rival great powers at the same time. That was too much. An empire built on reach discovered the limits of reach. The American Revolution mattered far beyond the 13 colonies. A colonial revolt had defeated a major power and created an independent republic. That changed the political imagination of the Atlantic world. However, it also left contradictions everywhere it touched. For native nations, for enslaved people, for loyalists, and for women, American victory did not mean equal freedom. That is why this revolution still matters today. Not because it was simple, because it was powerful, flawed, and world-changing at the same time. In 1775, Britain looked unbeatable. By 1783, it had lost America, and the Atlantic world would never look the same again. Next time, the struggle returns to Britain itself, where another crisis over monarchy, parliament, and power would reshape the kingdom. The Glorious Revolution. Here's where I'd like your opinion. I've got a new microphone over the past week. Interested to see what you think of the sound quality. I want to thank all of you that stay to the end and hear this regularly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. Thanks for being there when it mattered. We're on a real run here, and we're going to keep going. Nil satis nisi optimium.